When the reporter asked David Bowie about Madonna in 1987, his answer made headlines worldwide. She copies everything. Nothing is original. What Madonna did 48 hours later didn't just silence Bowie. It made him call her to apologize. It was March 17, 1987, and David Bowie was sitting in a plush chair at the BBC studios in London, promoting his new album Never Let Me Down. The interview had been going smoothly, covering his music, his acting career, and his thoughts on the current state of rock and roll. Then the interviewer, a young journalist named Simon Bates, asked a question that would ignite one of the most fascinating confrontations in music history. David, there's a new generation of artists who seem to be following your blueprint of constant reinvention. Madonna, for instance, changes her image with every album. What do you think of her approach? Bowie, who had spent 2 decades building his reputation as the master of transformation, from Ziggy Stardust to the Thin White Duke to his current incarnation, didn't hesitate with his response. Madonna, Bowie said, a slight edge in his usually measured voice. She copies everything. The blonde ambition, the provocative imagery, the constant persona changes. None of it is original. She's taken what artists like myself, like Warhol, like the underground scene created, and she's repackaged it for mass consumption. There's no authenticity there, just clever marketing. The journalist's eyes widened. This wasn't the diplomatic Bowie people were used to. This was raw, unfiltered criticism of the biggest female pop star on the planet. So you don't see her as an artist in her own right, the journalist pressed. I see her as a very successful businesswoman, Bowie replied coolly. But an innovator, an original voice. No, she's a mirror reflecting what's already been done. The interview aired that evening on BBC Radio 1, and by the next morning, every major newspaper in London had run with the story. Bowie slams Madonna. She copies everything, screamed the Daily Mirror. The chameleon versus the copycat, declared the Sun. By noon, the story had crossed the Atlantic, and American media was in a frenzy. Madonna was in New York when the news reached her. She was in the middle of rehearsals for her upcoming Who's That Girl World Tour, working 14-hour days to perfect every detail of the show. Her manager, Freddie DeMann, burst into the rehearsal studio, holding a stack of newspapers. Madonna, we need to talk about Bowie, he said, his face tight with concern. Madonna stopped mid-choreography, breathing hard, sweat dripping down her face. What about him? Freddie handed her the newspapers. Madonna read the headlines, then the quotes, her expression unreadable. The dancers around her had stopped moving, watching nervously. Everyone knew Madonna's temper, knew she could explode at criticism, especially from someone she had long admired. But Madonna didn't explode. She set down the newspapers, walked to the corner of the studio, and sat in silence for a full 5 minutes while everyone watched and waited. Finally, she stood up, walked to the middle of the rehearsal floor, and said something that surprised everyone in that room. Cancel rehearsal for the rest of the day. I need to make some calls. What happened in the next 48 hours would become legendary in music industry circles, though very few people knew the full story until years later. Madonna went back to her apartment and made a call to Seymour Stein, the president of Sire Records, her label. I need you to get me every piece of music David Bowie has ever released, she said. Every album, every B-side, every bootleg. I want it all delivered to my apartment by tomorrow morning. Madonna, what's this about? Stein asked, confused. Just do it, Madonna said, and hung up. By 8 a.m. the next morning, Madonna's apartment looked like a record store. Hundreds of Bowie albums, singles, and rare recordings were stacked everywhere. She spent the entire day doing something she had never done so methodically before. She studied David Bowie's entire career, album by album, era by era. She listened to the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust, noting how Bowie had borrowed from Japanese kabuki theater and British music hall traditions. She analyzed Aladdin Sane, seeing influences from German expressionism and American soul. She traced station to station, recognizing elements of Kraftwerk, R&B, and European avant-garde. By midnight, Madonna understood something crucial. David Bowie, the man who accused her of copying everything, had built his entire legendary career on synthesizing influences from dozens of sources and making them his own. He hadn't invented reinvention. He had perfected the art of creative borrowing. But Madonna didn't want to attack Bowie. She respected him too much, and frankly, he was right about some things. What she wanted was to prove that she understood the difference between copying and creating, between imitation and innovation. At 2 a.m., she called her record label's publicity department and told them to arrange a press conference for Thursday afternoon, exactly 48 hours after Bowie's interview had aired. She gave them specific instructions. Invite every major music journalist in New York, but don't tell them what it's about. Just say Madonna has an important announcement. Thursday afternoon arrived, and the press room at the Ritz Hotel was packed with over 100 journalists, all expecting Madonna to either attack Bowie or defend herself emotionally. Some had already written their articles, predicting an all-out celebrity feud. Madonna walked in wearing a simple black suit, no flashy costume, no provocative outfit, nothing that could distract from what she was about to say. She looked professional, composed, and absolutely in control. "Thank you all for coming," Madonna began, her voice steady. "I know you're here because of what David Bowie said about me earlier this week. I want to address that." The room fell silent. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. David Bowie said, "I copy everything, that I'm not original. And you know what? He's partially right." The room erupted in gasps and frantic note-taking. This wasn't what anyone expected. "Let me explain," Madonna continued. "Every artist who has ever existed has been influenced by those who came before them. David Bowie was influenced by Little Richard, by Lindsay Kemp, by Lou Reed, by German Expressionist cinema. The Beatles were influenced by Chuck Berry and Buddy Holly. Picasso said, 'Good artists copy, great artists steal.' The question isn't whether you're influenced, it's what you do with those influences." She paused, letting that sink in. "When I changed my look for Like a Virgin, yes, I was influenced by Marilyn Monroe and old Hollywood glamour. When I created my Express Yourself video, yes, I referenced Fritz Lang's Metropolis, the same film that influenced David Bowie's aesthetic. But I didn't just copy these things. I recontextualized them. I took imagery that had meaning in one era and gave it new meaning for my generation." Madonna then did something that shocked everyone. She pulled out a prepared document, a detailed analysis of how David Bowie himself had borrowed and transformed ideas throughout his career. But she didn't present it as an attack. She presented it as evidence that all great artists stand on the shoulders of those who came before them. "I'm not angry at David Bowie," Madonna said. "I'm actually grateful. He made me think deeply about the difference between copying and creating. And I want to be clear, David Bowie is a genius. He took influences and transformed them into something transcendent. That's what I aspire to do. Not to copy him, but to follow his example of transformation." Then Madonna made an announcement that stunned the media. "Next month I'm releasing a new video for Open Your Heart. In it, I'm going to deliberately reference several artists who influenced me, including David Bowie. I'm going to show my sources, acknowledge my influences, and demonstrate how I transform them into something new. Because that's what artists do. We don't create in a vacuum. We create in conversation with everything that came before us." The press conference ended with a standing ovation from the journalists, something that had never happened at a Madonna press conference before. She had turned a potential disaster into a masterclass on artistic creation. But the story doesn't end there. In fact, the most important part happened away from the cameras. That evening, David Bowie was in his New York apartment when he saw the news coverage of Madonna's press conference. His wife Iman was watching with him. "She handled that brilliantly," Iman said. Bowie sat in silence, watching Madonna's words played back on the news. He saw the prepared analysis she'd done of his work. He saw how she had refused to attack him, how she had instead elevated the conversation to something about art itself. "I was an ass," Bowie said quietly. "Yes, you were," Iman agreed. "What are you going to do about it?" The next morning, Bowie did something he almost never did. He called Madonna directly. She was in her dance studio when she got the call. "Madonna, this is David Bowie," the voice on the phone said. "I owe you an apology." Madonna, surprised but composed, replied, "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do," Bowie insisted. "I said something dismissive and reductive about your work. Your press conference yesterday made me realize something. I was criticizing you for doing exactly what I've done my entire career, taking influences and transforming them. The difference is I was threatened because you're doing it better, reaching more people, and doing it as a woman in an industry that's even harder on women than it was on me." Madonna was silent for a moment, processing this unexpected honesty. "I meant what I said at the press conference," she finally replied. "You're a genius, David. You created a blueprint for reinvention. I'm not copying you. I'm following the path you helped create. There's a difference." "I understand that now," Bowie said, "and I want to make this right. "Would you have dinner with me this week? I'd like to apologize properly and frankly learn from you." That dinner happened 3 days later at a quiet restaurant in Soho. They talked for 4 hours about art, influence, gender dynamics in the music industry, and the pressure of constant reinvention. By the end of the evening, they had developed a mutual respect that would last for the rest of Bowie's life. Bowie did one more thing that surprised everyone. He called Simon Bates at the BBC and asked to do a follow-up interview. When asked about Madonna again, his response was completely different. "I was wrong about Madonna," Bowie said on air. "She's not a copycat. She's a student of art history who understands something fundamental. Creativity is always in dialogue with what came before. She's brilliant at taking cultural touchstones and giving them new meaning for a new generation. That's not copying. That's what all great artists do." The media ate it up. "Bowie apologizes to Madonna" became the new headline cycle. But more importantly, Bowie and Madonna developed a genuine friendship. They would call each other for advice, attend each other's shows, and publicly praise each other's work. Years later, in a 1995 interview, Madonna reflected on the incident. "David taught me something important. He taught me that being defensive about your influences makes you look insecure. Owning them, understanding them, and showing how you transform them. That's what makes you an artist." Bowie, in a 2003 interview, said something equally revealing. "Madonna handled that situation with more grace and intelligence than I showed in starting it. She could have destroyed me with a counterattack, pointed out all my influences and borrowings. Instead, she elevated the conversation. That's real class." When David Bowie died in 2016, Madonna posted a tribute that referenced their 1987 confrontation. "David taught me that great artists borrow, great artists steal, and the greatest artists acknowledge their sources while creating something entirely new. He was the master of transformation, and I'm forever grateful for the lesson he taught me, even if he had to apologize for it first." The lesson in this story isn't about who was right or wrong. It's about how you respond when someone questions your authenticity, your originality, your right to create. Madonna could have attacked Bowie, could have started a public feud, could have let ego drive her response. Instead, she did something smarter. She used the criticism as an opportunity to articulate her artistic philosophy, to educate people about how creativity actually works, and to turn a critic into an admirer. David Bowie said Madonna copied everything. Madonna responded by showing the world that understanding your influences and transforming them into something new isn't copying, it's art. And in doing so, she didn't just defend herself. She defended every artist who has ever been accused of not being original enough, of borrowing too much, of standing on the shoulders of giants. Because here's the truth that both Madonna and Bowie eventually understood. There is no such thing as pure originality. Every idea builds on previous ideas. Every artist is influenced by other artists. The question isn't whether you borrow, it's whether you transform what you borrow into something meaningful, something that speaks to your time and your audience. Madonna proved in 48 hours that she understood this better than almost anyone. And David Bowie, to his eternal credit, was humble enough to admit when he was wrong, and wise enough to learn from someone he had underestimated. If this story of criticism transforming into respect inspired you, hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Drop a comment about a time someone questioned your originality and how you proved them wrong. And ring that notification bell. We've got 7 more incredible Madonna stories that will blow your mind.